who is personally Vladimir Putin? You used to work for him, you used to be his economic advisor, one of the most important advisors and policy makers in terms of economy in Russia.
No, it was definitely a joke for the second part, but it's definitely not true for the first part, because it's what we're dealing with right now is not a Cold War. And I gave at least three features that makes difference between Cold War that we had some time ago and that ended 23 years ago, and the current one. In the Cold War, that is very popular statement right now from many corners. In the Cold War, there was no personal sanctions. In the Cold War, there was no annexation of the part of the European country by another country. And in the Cold War on the European continent, there was no killing of more than 4,000 people. It's the official number of people killed in the eastern Ukraine. So what we're dealing right now is not a Cold War. Whether it is hot war or it should be called in some other way, it's a topic of discussion, but it's definitely not a Cold War. It's not neither old Cold War nor the Cold War number 2. And you are asking about the person who definitely is in charge of launching this war, actually by many Kremlin people, propaganda people. It is being called Fourth World War. They call the Cold War, that old Cold War, the Third World War. So that is why they themselves call this the Fourth World War, the war that is being waged by Russia against almost everybody in the remaining world. So they consider that the war for so-called their traditional conservative values, for the creation of the Russian world, for some kind of, in essence, for a new neo-imperial project on the territory of the post-Soviet Union, or maybe the post-Russian Empire space. So, and the person in charge is, as you are correctly mentioned, Mr. Putin, and he could hardly be called as a hot person. He's a rather cold-minded person. He's very rational, he's very calculated, and he makes his move based on very substantial analysis.
So what is the goal of this war that is going on right now between Russia and the free world?
Yeah, so from their logic, putting aside whether it's right or wrong, but just to understand this logic, they do consider that Ukraine does not have a right to choose own future. Ukraine has no right to choose alliances with any other nations. So they think that Ukraine, as well as other countries of the post-Soviet Union space, should take their future according to their wishes, according to their desire. They call this as a sphere of privileged interests. And it is very important to mention here that they never defined where the borders of these spheres of privileged interest. When one of these people, Mr. Medvedev, who is certainly not the main author of these policies, but one of the proponents of this policy, has been asked whether sphere of privileged interest limited to by the post-Soviet space or could go beyond it. He said, no, we have privileged interest beyond these spheres as well, beyond these borders. So, once again, nobody yet defined where the borders of these spheres of privileged interest lie. But it's definitely that Mr. Putin, with his colleagues, with his team, if it is possible to call them, could go as far as he would be allowed to go.
It reminds the old plans of the Soviet Union. The old plans of Soviet Union were much further than only the post-Soviet sphere or the post-Soviet area, as you called it, because the plan of the Soviet Union was an offensive plan to attack the whole Western world. Do you think that this plan is still in mind of the planist of Vladimir Putin or Vladimir Putin himself?
Yes and no. Yes, because definitely it can be compared with any imperial project in the past, and Soviet Union would be one of these models. No, because Soviet Union had a very clear and ideological component in that imperial project. It was a communism. It was a very ideologically driven project, and that is why they tried to change each conquered country according to their communist ideals and communist models. So in this particular case, we don't see, at least so visibly, so-called ideological model. But if we look further, we could find this ideological model, but it's definitely not communism. It's a different type of approach. We can discuss it a bit later if you want.
But it's interesting. What do
yes,
you...
but before we move to that area, I would like to give another example of comparison. You're probably aware that about months ago, on October 24th, Mr. Putin gave the so-called Sochi speech, or sometimes called Valdai speech, during the meeting of the Valdai Club. I think it's probably one of the most important, or maybe the most important speech given by Mr. Putin, because it's the essence of this imperial approach towards today's world. Because it's in this speech he completely disagrees with the current rules of the world order, with the current international system, and he suggests to change the system to a new one. And this is a speech is very clear. This is a message to Mr. Obama, to the US president, with a very clear suggestion. Okay, I recognize you as another imperial power, as he says. You have your own interest, you have your own sphere of privileged interest, you have whatever intervention in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and so on. I do recognize it, but by recognizing your sphere of interest, you need to recognize my sphere of interest, where I will have full right to intervene and establish my order. And that is why it's a very clear oferta to US government and Mr. Obama to share the world and to establish new rules of the world order. And from this particular perspective, it is not very similar to what Soviet leaders ever approached in their relation with the West. Because I cannot recall that Soviet Politburo or Kremlin leaders ever suggested such an approach towards the United States or towards Western leaders. But this approach reminded me another example in history, which actually is very, very similar to what we've heard 1 month ago. This is the two messages that have been sent by Adolf Hitler, Chancellor of Reich, German Reich, in August 1939, on August 23rd and on August 25th of 1939, to Neville Chamberlain, then Prime Minister of Britain. In that two messages, Hitler suggested to Neville Chamberlain exactly the same idea, to change the rule of the world order and to share the Western Europe between British Empire and German Reich. As we know, exactly the same time, just maybe a few days before, Hitler sent his Minister of Foreign Affairs, Joachim Ribbentrop, to Moscow with the same idea for sharing Eastern and Central Europe between German Reich and the Soviet Union. As we know, Joseph Stalin has accepted this idea, and as a result of that was the pact of Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, in which Germany and Soviet Union have divided the Central and Eastern Europe.
Did Barack Obama accept Vladimir Putin's offer, in your opinion?
So far, I'm not sure that Mr. Obama even understood that what has been given to him. Mr. Putin was going to Beijing first and to Brisbane after that, looking for personal contact with Mr. Obama, some kind of trying to get the answer from that. But looks like in Beijing they did not spend much time discussing these particular proposals. But in Brisbane, it seems to me that Mr. Obama did not have enough time to meet Mr. Putin and to discuss with him anything else. So that is why we don't know yet what was Mr. Obama's response, and I doubt that Mr. Obama will give positive answer to Mr. Putin when he would get the essence of this message. Nevertheless, if you compare these two documents, I mean, once again, the Sochi/Valdai speech of Mr. Putin on October 24th, with two messages that Hitler sent to Chamberlain on August 23rd and 25th of 1939, almost exactly 75 years before, so we would find at least 25 pieces where word by word or sentence by sentence, idea by idea, almost exactly the same.
The Valdai speech, in this speech, the nuclear weapons as a means of foreign policy were also mentioned by Vladimir Putin. How shall we understand it?
I think we should look not only on this Sochi speech for the kind of the mentioning of nuclear weapons, but we should look on some other signs. As you remember, Mr. Kiselyov, one of the kind of the TV information generals, was issuing warnings for United States and other countries in the world that Russia can destroy US with nuclear strike. In the last several weeks, there were almost no a single day that some people on the Russian TV from the Russian propaganda machine would not mention that Russia's ability to destroy other countries with nuclear strikes. So that is kind of nuclear blackmail became very routine, regardless how it kind of horrible could sound in normal circumstances. Now it became very routine business. Now we need to understand what does it mean. I would like to mention and like to remind you that during the Soviet time, during the Cold War that we touched earlier, the most important element for US and NATO resistance for, again, the potential attack from the Soviet Union or Warsaw Pact was deployment of tactical nuclear weapons in the Western Europe, because West was not able to mobilize so many soldiers. So that is why tactical nuclear weapons were considered to be the most effective anti-offensive weapon. Those tactical nuclear weapons have been withdrawn from Western Europe some time ago. The last element of the heavy military equipment that NATO had in the Western Europe, the US tanks Abrams, have been withdrawn from Western Europe in the first half of year 2013. Putting all these together, it is probably not strange, it's not maybe coincidence that Mr. Putin he launched this Russian-Ukrainian war, and this is called Fourth World War, on July 27th, year 2013, after tactical nuclear weapons and tanks Abrams have been withdrawn from Europe. At this moment, Western Europe are really at the probably lowest level, or the low point of its defense capabilities. And that is why it's not only psychological inability to understand the nature of the regime that is threatening the peace and stability in Europe and elsewhere in the world, but also absence of very material elements of potential resistance against aggression all of this makes Europe so vulnerable at this moment.
What is the reason and what is the meaning of the air raids of Russian air forces into the NATO countries?
Some people claim that it is a kind of the way to test the air defense or any other elements of defense capability of the European countries, and probably there is element in this. But from my point of view, it looks like that is also element of blackmail. It's an element of blackmail for European countries, as an element of this nuclear blackmail. It's air blackmail, just to send European countries and the NATO countries a message. When I'm dealing with, in my sphere of privileged interest, with countries that I'd like to swallow, you should stay away. You should not be involved in this. In any way, in politically, technically, organizationally, militarily, in any way, just stay away. That's kind of the sending a very strong message. And I would not exclude, in addition to that you didn't ask me, but I would, using this opportunity, would mention that European countries and European nations would probably not very much surprised if, let's say, in the spring of next year, 2015, there will be some kind of massive political movement, let's say kind of Islamic Spring, but it will be not in Arab countries, but in Europe, that could destabilize some European countries and would some kind of consume energy and attention of European leaders in a time when Mr. Putin will try to fulfill his neo-imperial project in the territory of the post-Soviet
like
states.
ISIS is taking right now.
No. ISIS is just in the territory of the Middle East, and they kind of capture some territory.
Yeah, but the focus of the Western leaders is on ISIS right now, not on Ukraine.
Okay, it's kind of divided, but definitely with a substantial shift towards ISIS in the Middle East. But let's say there will be some kind of movements and some kind of activities in European countries themselves. It would be rather hard to pay enough attention to what is going on in the post-Soviet states.
You suggest that it could be triggered by the Russia?
I'm just warning that if and when it will happen, so Western societies, European society should not be much shocked and surprised. They are warned right now in November 2014.
Mr. Ilarionov, do you find Smolensk plane crash a part of this whole big plan that we are talking right now, or no?
What I could say about the Smolensk crash on April 10th, 2010, we have a number of questions. Even that time, in April and May 2010, I formulated at least 17 big questions. I'm not talking about many dozens or many hundreds technical questions, but 17 big questions concerning this crash. For all these 4.5 years that happened since this crash, we did not get answers on any of these questions. What we do know, we know that some parts of the so-called official report from MAC, International Aviation Committee, falsified. It's a very clear and open lie. We know that many statements from Russian officials that time in April 2010 are open lie. We know that there appeared some strange people who were easily identified as agents of special services who tried to provide some kind of very falsified version of events. That was very clear. We still don't know why the plane that crashed from apparently low altitude, about 15 meters, has been destroyed in so many little pieces, and the debris have been kind of scattered on a huge territory. We still don't understand why a plane that crashed from such a not high altitude led to death of all passengers. There is no other case with similar crashes with all passengers and all team have been killed. Yes, there were some people who have been killed, but there were many wounded and many people would survive in similar crashes. There is no case that one tree, birch tree or any other tree, could destroy the wing of the plane. There are many other questions. Nobody from official authorities, from the International Aviation Committee, and from what I see from the official report from the Polish authorities, were able to provide reasonable answers to those questions and many other questions. I'm still far from making any conclusions how that crash should be justified and how should be explained. I think I try to be cautious in this regard. I'd like, first of all, to get reasonable answers on this question first. We don't have them.
Mr. Ilarionov, the final question. The whole picture that we are talking about is pretty scary for the Western civilization. In your opinion, what the Western world should do to stop the war? You mentioned that Vladimir Putin and this group, which is ruling Russia right now, will go as far as it will be allowed to. What should the West do to stop it?
Well, first of all, the West, and actually I would say the rest of the world, because there is no big difference between the West and the rest of the world. First of all, they should understand the nature of the problem. At this moment, at least I would say 1 month ago, it was a very clear sign that not very many people in the West did understand it, or did want to understand that. In the last couple of weeks, we see some elements of evolution in attitudes of Chancellor Angela Merkel, and her maybe belated admittance that her approach towards relations between Germany and Russia was a mistake, a personal mistake for 9 years, because she tried to be anti-locator between the West and Putin's Russia, happened to be ended in disaster. Okay, she actually in year 2008 was a crucial person who did not allow Georgia and Ukraine to take a path to become members of NATO. And actually it provoked Mr. Putin to attack Georgia and to occupy 1/5 of Georgian territory. So that is why personal responsibility for these mistakes and this mistaken approach of Mrs. Merkel that time should be understood very clearly. If she really started to understand better the nature of the problem, that actually suggests her remarks after Brisbane G20 meeting and her recent speech in Bundestag, so it's a positive remark, positive sign. But Mrs. Merkel is not the only person in the West who should understand it. There is another person, Mr. Obama, and still that person is able to understand the problem. But from this first stage of understanding, there is a very many now other steps that should be taken based on this understanding. Because the only way to stop aggressor is resistance. Resistance in many ways, starting from information resistance, political resistance, moral resistance, psychological resistance, and at some point, if it is necessary, even resistance with force. If there is no resistance, aggressor will continue to attack other countries and other nations, with always, not only with clear military, but with information and disinformation campaign, with psychological warfare, with cyber warfare, and it is not considered to be an aggression by many Western countries. Nevertheless, these nations and these societies could fall victims of this new type of hybrid war,